The weather in Guancheng was still unbearably hot in October, with only the mornings and evenings offering a hint of the coolness of late autumn. Hai Tong woke up early, prepared breakfast for her sister's family of three, and quietly left, clutching her household registration booklet. From now on, we're going Dutch, whether it's living expenses, mortgage, or car loan, we have to split it all. Your sister living with us should also pay half. What's the use of giving 2,000 yuan a month? It's no different from eating and living for free. These were her brother-in-law's words during her sister and brother-in-law's argument last night, overheard by Hai Tong. She had to move out of her sister's house. But to put her sister at ease, there was only one way: to get married. With no boyfriend and wanting to get married quickly, she decided to accept Grandma Jean's request, the old lady she had saved by chance, and marry Grandma Jean's eldest grandson, Jean, whose marriage had been difficult. 20 minutes later, Hai Tong got off the car at the entrance of the Civil Affairs Bureau. Hai Tong. As soon as she got off the car, Hai Tong heard a familiar call. It was Grandma Jean. Grandma Jean. Hai Tong walked over quickly and saw a tall, stern man standing beside Grandma Jean, presumably her intended, Jean. As she got closer, Hai Tong got a clear look at Jean Yin's appearance and was taken aback. In Grandma Jean's words, her eldest grandson, Jean, was already 30 years old and couldn't even find a girlfriend, which worried her greatly. Hai Tong had always thought he must be a very unattractive man. After all, she had heard that he was also a high-level executive of a large group with a high income. Seeing him now, she realized she was mistaken. Because Jean was very handsome, his temperament was rather cold, standing beside Grandma Jean with a gloomy face, appearing exceptionally cool, exuding an aura of inaccessibility. Her gaze shifted slightly, noticing a black business car parked not far away, with a Dongfeng logo, not a luxury car worth millions, which made Hai Tong feel that the distance between her and Jean was not that far. She and her old classmate and friend ran a bookstore at the entrance of Guancheng Middle School. In her spare time, she also knitted small items to sell online, which sold quite well. Her monthly income was stable at over 20,000 yuan. In Guancheng, earning over 20,000 yuan a month could put one in the white-collar class. So every month, she gave her sister 5,000 yuan for living expenses. However, her brother-in-law was unaware of her income. She asked her sister to save 3,000, only telling her brother-in-law about 2,000. Hai Tong, this is my eldest grandson, Jean, a 30-year-old leftover man who still can't sell himself. However, although he is a bit cold, he is very meticulous and caring. You saved my life, and we have known each other for 3 months. Trust me, I would not recommend a bad grandson to you. Jean, having heard his grandmother's description of him, glanced at Hai Tong, his eyes deep and cold, but he said nothing. Probably, he had been ridiculed by his grandmother so many times that he had become immune. Hai Tong knew that Grandma Jean had 3 sons, and each son had given her 3 grandsons, so she had a total of 9 grandsons, but no granddaughters, which is why she treated Hai Tong like a granddaughter. Hai Tong's face flushed slightly, but she still generously extended her right hand to Jean and introduced herself with a smile. Mr. Jean, hello. I am Hai Tong. Jean Yin's sharp gaze swept Hai Tong from head to toe, and then from toe to head again. Only after his grandmother reminded him with a light cough did he extend his right hand to shake Hai Tong's hand, his voice also low and cold. Jean. After shaking hands, Jean raised his left hand, checked his watch, and said to Hai Tong, I'm very busy. Let's make this quick. Hai Tong acknowledged with a hum. Grandma Jean hurriedly said, You two go in and get the paperwork done. I'll wait for you here. Grandma, go to the car. It's hot outside. Jean said as he helped his grandmother back to the car. Hai Tong watched his actions and believed Grandma Jean's words that Jean was cold but also meticulous and caring. Although she and he were strangers, Grandma Jean said he owned a house outright, and by marrying him, she could move out of her sister's house, and her sister would be at ease, no longer having to argue with her brother-in-law because of her. Her marriage was just a partnership. Soon, Jean returned to Hai Tong and said, Let's go. Hai Tong acknowledged with a hum and silently followed him into the Civil Affairs Bureau. At the marriage registration office, Jean-Yin reminded Hai Tong, "Miss Hai, if you don't want to, you can still back out. Don't worry about what my grandmother says. Marriage is a big deal. It's not a game." He hoped that Hai Tong would back out, because he did not want to marry a woman he had only met once. "Since I agreed, I won't go back on my word." Hai Tong had also thought about it for several days before making the decision. Since she had decided, she would not go back on her word. Hearing her say this, Jeanine did not try to persuade her any further. He took out his identification and placed it in front of the staff member. Hai Tong did the same. The two of them quickly went through the marriage process, which took less than 10 minutes in total. When Hai Tong received the marriage certificate from the staff member, Jeanine took out a set of keys from his pocket that he had prepared earlier and handed them to Hai Tong, saying, "The house I bought is in Mingyuan Garden. I heard from Grandma that you opened a bookstore at the entrance of Guancheng Middle School. My house is not far from there. It's about a 10-minute bus ride. Do you have a driver's license? If you do, you can get a car. I can help you with the down payment, and you can pay the monthly installments. Having a car will make it easier for you to commute. I'm very busy with work. I leave early and come back late, and sometimes I go on business trips. Just take care of yourself. Don't worry about me. As for the household expenses, I'll transfer them to you on the 10th of every month after I get paid. Also, in order to avoid trouble, let's keep our marriage a secret for now." Jeanine was probably used to giving orders at the company. He said a string of things without waiting for Hai Tong to speak. Hai Tong agreed to a flash marriage because she didn't want her sister to quarrel with her brother-in-law because of her anymore. She needed to get married and move out of her sister's house so that her sister could be at ease. It was just a partnership. Since Jean-Yin took the initiative to give her the keys to the house, she accepted them without hesitation. "I have a driver's license, but I don't think I need to buy a car for now. I usually ride my electric scooter to and from work. I just replaced the battery, and it would be a shame to not use it." Meeste, Jean, do we need to go Dutch? Her sister and brother-in-law had a relationship based on feelings, but he still proposed to go Dutch, always feeling that her sister was taking advantage of him. Who knew how much time it took to take care of a child, buy groceries, cook, and clean the house? Men who had never experienced it always thought that their wives just took care of the children and cooked at home, which was very easy. She and Jean-Yin had a flash marriage. They had never even met before today. Going Dutch would be more comfortable. Without even thinking, Jeanine said in a deep voice, "Since I married you, I can support you and our family. There's no need to go Dutch." Hai Tong smiled and said, "Then we'll do as you say." She wouldn't just take advantage without contributing. Since she would be living in his house, she would buy whatever was needed for the house with her own money. After all, she was saving on rent. Mutual contribution and understanding were the keys to making a life together. Jeanine raised his right hand again to check the time, then said to Hai Tong, "I'm very busy. I have to go back to the company first. You can borrow my car to go home, or you can take a taxi. I'll reimburse you for the fare. As for my grandmother, I'll take her to my brother's place. By the way, let's add each other on WeChat for easier communication." Hai Tong took out her phone, added Jeanine on WeChat, and said, "I'll take a taxi myself. You go ahead and get to work. Okay, contact me if you need anything." Before leaving, Jeanine gave Hai Tong 200 yuan for the taxi fare. She didn't want it, but he glared at her, and she instinctively took the money. The newlywed couple did not walk out of the Civil Affairs Bureau together. Jean-Yin came out first. After coming out, he went straight back to his car. "Where's my granddaughter-in-law?" Grandma Jean, seeing only her grandson coming out, asked suspiciously, "You two went in together? Why didn't you come out together? Did you change your mind? Or did Hai Tong change her mind?" After fastening his seat belt, Jeanine took out his marriage certificate, turned his head, and handed it to his grandmother. "We got the certificate. I'm very busy at the company. I have to rush back for a meeting." I gave her 200 yuan to take a taxi back herself. "Grandma, I'll drop you off at the intersection ahead, and the bodyguard will take you home. No matter how busy you are, you can't leave Hai Tong alone. Don't drive yet. Wait for Hai Tong to come out, take her home, and then go to work." Grandma Jean was about to get out of the car, but the door was locked. Grandma, I've already agreed to marry her. Don't interfere in other matters. Since I'm the one getting married and living with her, I'll have the final say from now on. Also, I need to slowly assess her character. Before she passes my assessment, I won't become a real husband to her either. Grandma Jean, men of our Jean family don't get divorced. That depends on whether the wife you chose for me is worth my lifelong commitment. As Jeanine spoke, he started the car. You brat, how can you be such a husband? You just got your marriage certificate and you're leaving your new wife behind and driving off on your own. Grandma Jean knew that her eldest grandson's limit was to get the marriage certificate with Tong. As for other things, he insisted on his principles. She really couldn't do anything to him. If she pushed him too hard, this kid would make Tong live like a widow for the rest of her life, and she would be the one who harmed Tong. Jean-Yin let his grandmother scold him. If Tong was really good, he would give her happiness. If she had deceived his grandmother and her usual goodness was all an act, he would divorce her after half a year. Anyway, he wouldn't touch her, and since it was a secret marriage, she could still marry a good man after the divorce. After about 10 minutes, the car stopped at an intersection. Several luxury cars were parked there, including a Rolls-Royce. Jeanine parked the car on the side of the road, got out, and threw the car keys to a waiting bodyguard, instructing, "Take the old madam home. I'm not going back. I want to live with you and be with my granddaughter-in-law." Grandma Jean protested, but her precious eldest grandson had already gotten into the Rolls-Royce, turning a deaf ear to her protest. She could only watch helplessly as her eldest grandson drove away in the luxury car. Jeanine, in fact, was the crown prince of Guancheng's business world and also the head of Guancheng's richest family, with a net worth of hundreds of billions. That brat, he's so heartless. Grandma Jean cursed her eldest grandson and muttered viciously, "I hope one day you'll fall madly in love with Tong. Grandma is waiting to see you eat your words." She couldn't call her eldest grandson back, no matter how angry she was. Grandma Jean quickly called Tong, who was already on her way home in a taxi. Tong, Ayin is really busy with work. Don't hold it against him." Tong touched the marriage certificate she had stuffed in her pocket and said, "Grandma Jean, I understand. I won't mind, and you don't have to feel guilty. He gave me the taxi fare, and I'm already on my way home. You got the certificate, and you're still calling me Grandma Jean?" Tong was slightly taken aback, then changed her address and called her Grandma. The old lady happily agreed. "Tong, we are family now. If Ayin dares to bully you, tell Grandma, and Grandma will teach him a lesson for you." She had finally managed to snag a granddaughter-in-law, and the old lady would not allow her grandson to bully her. "Grandma, I will," Tong replied casually. Although Grandma Jean was very kind to her, Jean-Yin was her biological grandson. Tong was only a granddaughter-in-law. If the couple really had a conflict, would the Jean family side with her? Tong didn't believe it. Just like her sisters-in-laws. Before the marriage, they were exceptionally good to her sister. So good that their own daughter was jealous. After the marriage, their attitude changed completely. Every time her sister and her husband had a disagreement, her mother-in-law would blame her sister for not being a good wife. So, after all, one's own son is always family, while a daughter-in-law is always an outsider. You have to go to work, right? Then Grandma won't bother you. I'll ask Ain to pick you up tonight and come home for dinner. Grandma, I close the shop very late at night, so it might not be convenient to come back for dinner. How about the weekend? On weekends, the schools were closed, and their bookstores relied on the student population. When school was out, business was slow, and they could even close the shop, giving her free time. "All right," Grandma Jean said considerately. "Then we'll talk about it on the weekend. You go ahead and work." The old lady took the initiative to end the call. Tong didn't immediately go to the shop. Instead, she first sent a message to her good friend, Shen Xiaojun. She would rush back to the shop before the students were dismissed for lunch. Now that her marriage was finalized, she had to tell her sister and move out of her sister's home. 15 minutes later, Tong returned to her sister's house. Her brother-in-law had already left for work. Her sister, Ling, was hanging clothes on the balcony. Seeing her return, she asked with concern, Tong, why are you back? Aren't you opening the shop today? I'll go over at noon." It's busy then? Is Yang Yang still asleep? Zhou Yang was Haidong's nephew, just 2 years old and at a mischievous age. Not yet. If he were awake, the house wouldn't be so quiet. Haidong helped her sister hang the clothes and asked about last night. Tong, your brother-in-law didn't mean to drive you away. He's just under a lot of pressure, and I don't have any income. Ha Ling explained for her husband. Haidong remained silent. Her brother-in-law was indirectly driving her away. He was a manager at a company with a high income. Her sister and he were college classmates and had worked at the same company. After they got married, her brother-in-law affectionately told her sister, I'll take care of you from now on. You can stay home, rest, and prepare for pregnancy. Her sister felt she had married the right man and actually resigned to become a stay-at-home wife. A year after their marriage, she gave birth to a chubby baby boy. Taking care of the child and the household kept her so busy that she no longer had time to dress up, take care of her figure, or return to the workplace. 3 years had passed, and her sister had gone from a young, beautiful woman to a plump, casually dressed housewife who didn't care about her appearance. Haidong was 5 years younger than her sister. When she was 10, her parents died in a car accident. From then on, she and her sister relied on each other. The compensation from the car accident should have been enough for the sisters to complete their studies, but their grandparents took a portion, and their maternal grandparents took another portion. With the remaining money, the sisters lived frugally and managed to graduate from college. Because their grandparents had taken over their house in their hometown, Haidong had always rented an apartment with her sister until her sister got married, ending their days of renting. Haidong's sister loved her very much and had agreed with her brother-in-law before the marriage that Haidong would live with them. Her brother-in-law had readily agreed, but now he was starting to resent her living there. Sister, I'm sorry. I'm a burden to you. No, Tong, don't think that way. Mom and Dad are gone, and I'm your support. Haidong was touched. When they were young, her sister was her support. Now, she wanted to be her sister's support. After a moment of silence, she took out her marriage certificate and handed it to her sister. Sister, I'm married. I just got the certificate and came back to tell you. I'll pack up and move out later. You're married? Ha Ling's voice rose several decibels, practically a shriek. She looked at her sister in disbelief and quickly snatched the marriage certificate, opening it to see a wedding photo of her sister and a strange man. Hi, Don, what's going on? Don't you even have a boyfriend? The man in the marriage certificate was handsome, but his eyes were sharp, and his expression was too cold. He didn't look easy to get along with. Haidong had already thought of an explanation on the way back. Sister, I've been dating for a while. His name is Jianin. It's just that he's been so busy with work that he hasn't had time to come back and meet you. He proposed and I accepted. Then we went to the Civil Affairs Bureau and got our marriage certificate. Sister, he's a very outstanding man, and he's very good to me. Don't worry, I'll be happy after I get married. Ha Ling still couldn't accept it. She had never heard her sister mention having a boyfriend, and now she was suddenly married. Remembering the argument she and her husband had last night, which her sister had overheard, Ha Ling's eyes reddened with distress. Tong, I told my husband that you've been contributing to the household expenses. You can stay here without worry. You don't have to rush into marriage and move out. She was sure her sister hadn't known this man for long. Otherwise, she would have told her. Suddenly getting married today was because her husband was tired of her sister living there for so long, and her sister had rushed into marriage to avoid causing problems in her sister's marriage. Haidong smiled and comforted her sister. Sister, it really has nothing to do with you. Jianin and I have a good relationship. I really will be happy. Sister, you should be happy for me. Ha Ling continued to cry. Haidong helplessly hugged her sister. After her sister finished crying and calmed down, she promised, Sister, I'll come back and see you often. Zhang Yin's house is in Mingyuan Gardens, not far from here. It's only a 10-minute ride on my electric scooter. What's his family like? The deed was done, and Ha Ling could only accept it. She asked about her brother-in-law's family. Haidong actually didn't know much about the Zhang family. Although she had known Grandma Zhang for 3 months, she didn't usually ask about the Zhang family's affairs. When Grandma Zhang talked, she just listened. She only knew that Zhang Yin was the eldest son, with a string of younger brothers, including cousins, below him. Zhang Yin worked at one of the top companies in Guancheng, had a car and a house, so his family shouldn't be too bad. Haidong told her sister what she knew. Hearing that her brother-in-law had bought the house outright, Haling said, "That's his premarital property. Tong, can you ask him to add your name to the property deed?" Having her sister's name on the deed would at least provide some security. "Sis, you said it yourself. That's his premarital property. I didn't contribute a single cent. It wouldn't be right to ask him to add my name to the deed. Let's not talk about it." Getting the marriage certificate and the house keys from Jeanine, allowing her to move in immediately and solving her housing problem, was already good enough. She wouldn't ask Jeanine to add her name to the deed. If he offered, she wouldn't refuse. Since they were married, she was determined to spend her life with him. Hai Ling only mentioned it in passing, knowing her sister was self-reliant and not greedy, so she didn't dwell on the issue. After a thorough interrogation by her sister, Hai Tong finally managed to move out. Her sister wanted to drive her to Famous Garden, but her nephew, Zhou Yang, woke up and started crying for his mother. "Sis, you take care of Yang Yang. I don't have much stuff. I can go by myself." Hai Ling still needed to feed her son and then prepare lunch. If her husband came home and lunch wasn't ready, he would scold her for not doing anything at home, yet failing to even cook a meal. "Be careful on your way then. Are you coming for lunch? Bring your husband along." "Sis, I need to go back to the shop at noon, so I won't be coming over. My husband is very busy. He said he has a business trip this afternoon and might not be able to visit you for a while." Hai Tong lied. She didn't know Jeanine at all, but she had heard from Grandma Jean that he was very busy, always leaving early and returning late, and sometimes going on business trips for 10 days or half a month at a time. She didn't know when he would be free and didn't dare to make a promise to her sister in case she couldn't keep it. A business trip right after getting married today? Hai Ling felt her brother-in-law wasn't being considerate. "We just got the certificate, haven't had the wedding yet. Let him go on his business trip and earn more money. We'll need it later." Hai Tong waved goodbye to her sister and nephew and dragged her suitcase downstairs. She knew of Famous Garden, but had never been inside. She hailed a taxi and went straight there. Upon arrival, she realized she had forgotten to ask Jean which floor his apartment was on. She hurriedly took out her phone to call him, but realized she didn't have his number. Fortunately, they had added each other on WeChat, so she made a voice call. Jeanine was in a meeting. Everyone in the conference room had their phones on silent. He didn't allow personal calls during meetings. He had also muted his phone, but it was on the table, and he quickly saw Hai Tong's incoming voice call. They hadn't added names when they became WeChat contacts. Hai Tong's WeChat name was Mermaid in the Deep Sea. Seeing an unfamiliar name, he picked up the phone and hung up without a second thought, then deleted Hai Tong from his contacts. Unaware of his actions, Hai Tong sent a message after he didn't answer her call. "Mr. Jean, I'm at Famous Garden, but I don't know which floor your apartment is on." After typing and sending, she realized they weren't contacts anymore. She stared at her phone, bewildered. "How are we not contacts anymore? We exchanged WeChat at the Civil Affairs Bureau. Did I add the wrong person?" she muttered, trying to recall if she had made a mistake. Certain she hadn't. There was only one possibility. Jeanine had deleted her. Had he forgotten they just got married? Honestly, if she hadn't moved out of her sister's place, Hai Tong might have forgotten she had a husband named Jean-In in a couple of days. Hai Tong called Grandma Jean. "Grandma, I moved out of my sister's place, and I'm at Famous Garden now, but I don't know which floor." Jeanine, and my apartment is on. Do you know? Grandma Jean." "Hai Tong, don't worry, I'll call Ain right now." She didn't know either. Jeanine, in order to test Hai Tong, had bought a new apartment and car which Hai Tong knew nothing about. She only learned about the apartment in Famous Garden after they got their marriage certificate. Grandma Jean hung up and called Jeanine. After deleting his new wife's WeChat contact, Jeanine put his phone back on the table and continued the meeting. Less than 3 minutes later, his phone lit up again. Seeing it was his grandmother calling, he had to answer. "Grandma, I'm in a meeting," he said in a low voice. "Can it wait until I get home?" "Ain, what's the address of the new apartment you bought in Famous Garden?" "Hai Tong moved there, but she doesn't know which floor." "Didn't you add her on WeChat?" "Tell her quickly." Jeanine raised an eyebrow. Oh, he remembered. He got married today, to a girl he had never met, but whom his grandmother liked very much. Her name seemed to be Hai Tong, and he had just deleted her from WeChat. Grandma, tell her it's Building B, 8th floor, apartment 808. All right, I'll tell her. You continue with your work? The old lady, always efficient, hung up and relayed the information to Hai Tong. Jeanine looked at his phone, paused, and sent a new friend request to Hai Tong. Hai Tong didn't mind him deleting her earlier and accepted his request. Sorry, I forgot who you were. Jeanine sent her a message apologizing. Hai Tong had saved Grandma Jean's life. It was Grandma Jean's children and their spouses who thanked her. Jeanine, a busy man, genuinely didn't remember who Hai Tong was. Even though his grandmother often mentioned her, he hadn't paid attention and couldn't remember her name. Hai Tong replied, "It's fine you're busy. I'll take my things upstairs. Need help? It's just a suitcase I can manage. Besides, even if I did, could you come back and help me?" Jeanine honestly replied, "No." He was too busy. He didn't have time to help her move. Hai Tong replied with a crying, laughing emoji and went silent, not wanting to disturb his work. Jeanine didn't send any more messages. They didn't know each other and had nothing to talk about. He only hoped his wife would be obedient and not bother him with every little thing. He didn't have time for it. Putting his phone back on the table, Jeanine looked up and realized everyone was staring at him. Jeanine said casually, "Continue the meeting." Closest to him was his younger cousin, Johnny Chin, the second young master of the Jean family. Johnny Chin leaned in and whispered, "Big brother, I heard what Grandma said to you. Did you really marry that Tong girl?" Jeanine gave him a sharp look. Johnny Chin touched his nose, sat up straight, and dared not ask any more questions. However, he felt immense sympathy for his older cousin. Although the Jean family men didn't need marriage alliances to consolidate their status, his big brother and sister-in-law were definitely not a match. Just because Grandma liked that girl named Hai Tong, his big brother had to marry her. How pitiful! Johnny Chin felt another surge of sympathy. Fortunately, he wasn't the eldest. Otherwise, he would have been the one marrying Grandma's lifesaver. Unaware of these things, Hai Tong asked which floor her new home was on and then dragged her suitcase to find it. After opening the door and entering, she found the apartment quite large, bigger than her sister's and luxuriously decorated. Putting down her suitcase, Hai Tong toured the apartment. This would be her home from now on. 2 living rooms for bedrooms, 1 kitchen, 2 bathrooms, and 2 balconies. Each space was quite spacious, and Hai Tong estimated the apartment to be at least 200 square meters. There was very little furniture, though. Only the living room had a sofa, coffee table, and a wine cabinet. 2 of the 4 bedrooms had a bed and wardrobe, while the other 2 were empty. The master bedroom was a suite divided into a bedroom, a small dressing room, a small study, and a bathroom. Even with these divisions, the master bedroom remained very large, comparable in size to the living room. This should be Zhang Yin's territory. Hai Tong chose the other bedroom with a bed. It was next to a balcony, had good lighting, and was separated from the master bedroom by another room, allowing the couple to maintain their private space. Although they were legally married, Hai Tong thought that as long as Zhang Yin didn't initiate intimacy, she definitely wouldn't. After pulling her suitcase into the room, Hai Tong went to the kitchen. The kitchen was spotless, but lacked any cookware. The 2 balconies were also empty. Due to their size, even the balconies felt spacious. Hai Tong thought about growing some flowers and plants on the balcony and buying a swing chair. It would be very pleasant to sit on the swing chair, reading and enjoying the flowers. It seemed Zhang Yin didn't usually eat at home. Now that she was living here, she definitely needed to cook. So, Hai Tong started with the kitchen, ordering a bunch of cookware online. As for planting flowers on the balcony and buying other furniture, she decided to wait for Zhang Yin to return and ask his opinion. After all, it was his apartment, and she was just staying here. After ordering the cookware, Hai Tong checked the time. She had to hurry back to the shop to help. She grabbed her keys and phone and hurried downstairs. When she returned to the shop, it was just in time for students to finish school. Her good friend, Shin Xiaojun, asked with concern, "Tong Tong, what were you doing this morning? My sister and brother-in-law have been arguing every day recently because of me." I thought it would be better to move out, Hai Tong said, looking at her friend and shrugging helplessly. So I moved out this morning. Thinking of her friend's brother-in-law, Shun Xiaojun found it hard to describe him and couldn't help but sigh. Men always like to say, I'll take care of you, but when they actually have to, they complain about everything and scold you to death. Once we women get married, we not only have to contribute to the family, but also endure all kinds of misunderstandings. It's so unfair. I think your sister should find a job. We women, no matter when, should maintain financial independence. With money, we can stand tall. As she spoke, she frowned slightly, looking a bit puzzled. Your sister agreed to let you move out? I got married. A what? You got married? You don't even have a boyfriend. Who did you marry? Shun Xiaojun nodded at first, then stared at her in astonishment, her voice rising a few notches. Hai Tong knew she couldn't hide these things from her, so she honestly told her everything. Shun Xiaojun stared at Hai Tong for a long time, then poked her forehead, saying, You're really brave. You dared to get a marriage license on the first meeting. If you really couldn't find a place to live, you could have moved in with me. I have plenty of spare rooms. If you wanted to get married, you could have married my cousin. Hai Tong laughed. Your cousin has a girlfriend. What would I do with him? The marriage certificate is already signed. It's too late for regrets. Just keep it a secret from me. Don't let my sister know the truth, so she won't be sad. Shun Xiaojun. Her friend was truly courageous. The heroines in novels all have flash marriages with billionaires. Tong is the one you flash married a billionaire too. As soon as she finished speaking, Hai Tong tapped her friend and laughed. You've read all the novels in our store, haven't you? Daydreaming again, like you can just randomly flash marry a billionaire. Do you think billionaires are everywhere? Shun Xiaojun touched the spot where her friend had tapped her, thinking what she said made sense. She sighed softly, then asked, Where's the house your husband bought? Mingyuan Gardens. Not bad. The environment there is good, transportation is convenient, and it's not too far from our store. Which company does your husband work for? Being able to buy a house in Guancheng and in a high-end community like Mingyuan Gardens, his income must be very high. What's the monthly payment? Do you need to help him pay the mortgage? Tong. If he asks you to help pay the mortgage, you have to ask him to add your name to the property deed, otherwise it's too much of a loss. To put it bluntly, if your relationship isn't good and you get divorced, that house is his premarital property, and you won't get a share. Hai Tong looked at her friend twice and said, He paid for the house in full. There's no mortgage. I didn't spend a penny, so it's not right to ask him to add my name to the deed. Shun Xiaojun said, If the couple's relationship is good, it doesn't matter. Hai Tong suddenly remembered that the house her sister currently lived in was also bought by her brother-in-law before marriage, and the mortgage was also being paid by him. Only the decoration costs were all her sister's money, but her brother-in-law hadn't added her sister's name to the property deed. Hai Tong thought about how her brother-in-law always accused her sister of only spending money and not earning it, and she felt worried. She'd have to remind her sister when she had the chance. Hai Tong didn't close the bookstore until 11 o'clock at night. Shun Xiaojun's house was very close to the store, and she had relatives inviting her to dinner that night. So Hai Tong let her go home first. After closing the bookstore door, Hai Tong took her electric scooter key out of her pocket and walked towards her scooter. She rode her scooter for over 20 minutes to reach her sister's building. After parking, she remembered that she had moved. Looking up at her sister's floor, she saw that the lights in her sister's apartment were already off. Hai Tong felt a little disappointed. Ultimately, she didn't disturb her sister's family of 3 and rode her scooter away. By the time she returned to Mingyuan Gardens, it was already past midnight. She pushed open the door and went in. The house was pitch black, devoid of any signs of life. She took her pajamas out of her suitcase, took a hot shower, and then, exhausted, Hai Tong fell asleep as soon as she hit the bed. Meanwhile, at the Guancheng Grand Hotel, Jean-Yin walked out of the Grand Hotel, owned by his family's company, surrounded by bodyguards. He had just finalized a large deal with a major client. The client was arranged to stay in the hotel's presidential suite. He remembered his newlywed wife, whom he had just registered his marriage with today, and decided to go home. Young master, are we going to the manor or the mountaintop villa? The manor was the Jean family's old residence, And the mountaintop villa was a large villa under Zhang Yin's name. He usually lived in the mountaintop villa and only occasionally returned to the Zhang family manor to have a meal with his elders and fulfill his filial duties. Go to Mingyuan Gardens. After getting into the Rolls-Royce, Zhang Yin instructed in a low voice, "Remember to bring my new Dongfeng van over." That was to fool his wife. What was his wife's name again? Right. What's the young madam's name? Zhang Yin couldn't be bothered to pull out his marriage certificate. Oh, when Grandma looked at the marriage certificate, she hadn't returned it to him yet. Had she? Anyway, he didn't have it on him now. Bodyguard. Young madam's surname is Hai. Her given name is Tong. She's 25 years old this year. Young master. You must remember this. Their young master had an excellent memory, but he couldn't remember the people he didn't want to remember, no matter what. Especially women. Even those he saw every day. The young master might not even know their names. I remember. Zhang Yin responded casually. From his tone, the bodyguards could tell that next time, their young master definitely still wouldn't remember young madam's name. Zhang Yin didn't want to be distracted by Hai Tong. Leaning back in the car seat, he closed his eyes to rest. The drive from Guancheng Grand Hotel to Mingyuan Gardens was only 10 minutes. The luxury motorcade stopped at the entrance of Mingyuan Gardens, and Zhang Yin drove the Dongfeng van into the complex alone. He might not remember his new wife's name, but Zhang Yin still remembered the house he bought. Soon, he arrived at his doorstep and saw a familiar pair of slippers. Weren't those his? Why were they thrown out? It must have been Hai Tong. Zhang Yin's eyes turned cold, his handsome face tightening. He had originally felt grateful to the girl who saved his grandmother, but when his grandmother constantly praised her and urged him to marry her, he lost his good impression of Hai Tong. He felt that Hai Tong was a scheming girl. Although he eventually agreed to marry Hai Tong for his grandmother's sake, he made an agreement with her. After marriage, he would hide his identity and assess Hai Tong's character. If she passed the test, he would truly become husband and wife with her and spend their lives together. If he discovered that Hai Tong was indeed a scheming girl, she shouldn't blame him for being ruthless. Those who dared to scheme against him, Zhang Yin, would not have a good ending. Taking out his key, Zhang Yin tried to open the door, but couldn't. Realizing that the woman inside had bolted the door, his dissatisfaction grew. This was his house. He let her stay, and she locked him out. In his anger, Zhang Yin kicked the door, making it bang loudly. At the same time, he made a voice call to Hai Tong. Learning from past experience, he had added her name and the words wife to her contact in his phone. Otherwise, he wouldn't remember who she was and would delete her from his contacts again. Hai Tong was awakened by Zhang Yin's kicking. In the middle of the night, who was banging on the door? Couldn't they let people sleep? Hai Tong was a bit grumpy when woken up, especially by being disturbed. She threw off the covers, put on her pajamas, and stormed out angrily. Her phone was in the bedroom, so she didn't know when Zhang Yin called. Who is it? What are you doing banging on my door in the middle of the night? Hai Tong opened the door, cursing at the man standing there as she pulled it open. When she saw who it was, she froze, staring at Zhang Yin for a long moment before she reacted. Quickly changing her expression to a smile, she said, "Shishinda, Mr. Zhang, it's you." Zhang Yin had called, but she didn't answer. His anger had piled up. At this moment, he couldn't be bothered with Hai Tong. With a dark expression, he walked past her and straight into the house. Hai Tong stuck her tongue out secretly. This was the aftereffect of a flash marriage. She peeked outside. Fortunately, Zhang Yin's loud banging hadn't woken the neighbors. Seeing the slippers at the door, Hai Tong bent down, picked them up, and went back inside, locking the door again. "I came back in the early morning. Seeing you weren't home, I thought you weren't coming back tonight, so I bolted the door." Hai Tong explained, "I'm the only woman at home. For safety, I put a pair of your slippers at the door, so others would see men's shoes and know there's a man inside, and wouldn't dare to do anything." She had learned Sanda and wasn't afraid of small-time thugs, but she still had a good sense of home security. Zhang Yin sat down on the sofa, his dark eyes fixed on her, his gaze sharp and cold. The October night was a little cool, but under his stare, Hai Tong felt not just cool, but as if winter had arrived early. "Cold, Mr. Zhang, I'm sorry." Hai Tong took his slippers over and placed them at his feet, apologizing. She should have called to ask if he was coming back. After a long silence, Jean-Yves said coldly, I did say you didn't have to worry about me, but this is my house. You shut me out, and I'm very unhappy. Mr. Jean, I'm sorry. Next time I'll call ahead to ask if you're coming back. If you're not, I'll bolt the door. Jean-Yves paused for a moment, then said, if I'm on a business trip, I'll tell you in advance. If I don't tell you, I'll be home every day. No need to call. I'm busy with work and don't have time to answer your pointless calls. Hai Tong replied with an oh. Whatever he said then, this was his house. He was the boss. Mr. Jean, would you like a late-night snack? Hai Tong thought he must be hungry after working until now and kindly asked, I never eat late-night snacks. I'll get fat. Jean-Yves was very particular about his physique and wouldn't allow himself to overindulge and become fat. Losing weight was too difficult. Hai Tong smiled. Mr. Jean's physique is very good. Then, I'll go back to my room to sleep. Jean-Yves hummed in agreement. Good night. Hai Tong said good night to him and turned to leave. Wait, Hai Tong. Jean-Yves called her back. Hai Tong stopped, turned her head, and asked him, is there anything else? Jean-Yves looked at her and said, in the future, don't come out wearing pajamas. She wasn't wearing anything under her pajamas, and his sharp eyes had seen everything he should and shouldn't have seen. They were husband and wife, so it was fine for him to see, but what if it were someone else? He didn't want his wife's body seen by other men. Hai Tong blushed and quickly ran back to her room, slamming the door shut. Jean-Yves. He hadn't felt embarrassed, but she was shy. After sitting for a while, Jean-Yves returned to his master bedroom. This house was a recent purchase, fully furnished and ready to move in. However, due to the rush, his room hadn't been properly organized. He was quite satisfied that Hai Tong was sensible and hadn't shamelessly insisted on sleeping in the same room with him, nor had she demanded he fulfill his husbandly duties. For the rest of the night, the couple remained undisturbed. The next day, Hai Tong woke up at 6 a.m. As usual, normally, she would prepare breakfast, then tidy up the house, and if there was enough time, she would help her sister hang the laundry. For the few years she'd lived at her sister's house, she'd acted as a housekeeper, simply because she didn't want her sister to be too tired. But in her brother-in-law's eyes, it was her duty, and he treated her like a servant. Waking up today and looking at the room that still felt unfamiliar after a night's sleep, her memory returned. Hai Tong muttered, I was half asleep. I thought I was still at my sister's house. This is my own home. I can sleep a little longer. She lay back down and tried to sleep again. Unfortunately, her body clock was too regular. Even though she wanted to go back to sleep, she couldn't. Her stomach was growling, so she simply got up. After getting dressed and washing up, she walked out of the room and glanced at Jean-Yves' room. The door was still closed. Presumably, he hadn't woken up yet. That made sense. He came back so late last night. How could he get up at this hour? Wandering into the kitchen and seeing it empty, Hai Tong was silent for a moment before turning back. She had ordered a lot of kitchenware online yesterday, but hadn't received them yet. She knew now she shouldn't have ordered online. Going directly to the supermarket would have been faster. When she moved in yesterday, she remembered seeing a breakfast shop near the complex. Hai Tong decided to go out and buy 2 breakfasts to go. She didn't know what Jean-Yves liked to eat and didn't want to wake him to ask, so she bought a variety of items. She picked up chung fun, steamed dumplings, fried dough sticks, soy milk, and preserved egg, and lean pork congee, common breakfast foods in Dingguan. Jean-Yves went to bed late, but woke up early. After Hai Tong left to buy breakfast, he woke up. Not used to having a wife, he momentarily forgot about Hai Tong's existence. He came out shirtless, intending to pour himself a glass of water. At that moment, Hai Tong opened the door and walked in. The couple came face to face. The next moment, Jean-Yves covered his chest with both hands and ran back to his room, just like Hai Tong had done the previous night. Hai Tong was stunned at first, then started laughing. She thought to herself, what's so interesting about a man's upper body? It's just to see how many abs he has. He actually covered his chest with both hands. Ha! That was hilarious. A while later, when Jean-Yves appeared in front of Hai Tong again, He was fully suited. His expression was unpleasant, but he couldn't blame Hai Tong, who told him to forget that there was a strange woman in his house, a strange woman who was also his nominal wife. He usually lived in his large villa. When he woke up in the morning, he was the only person on the entire second floor. As long as he didn't go downstairs, the servants wouldn't dare to come upstairs, so he was a bit unrestrained, occasionally coming out of his room without a shirt. Today was the same, and that scheming woman had seen his upper body. "Mr. Jean, I brought back breakfast. Come and eat." After laughing her fill, Hai Tong didn't forget to eat. She placed the various breakfast items she had bought on the dining room table and invited the man, who seemed to have lost a few pounds after she saw his upper body, to come and have breakfast. Jeanine was silent for a moment, then walked over. He glanced at the breakfast she had bought and asked coldly, "You don't know how to cook?" "I'm a very good cook." Breakfast bought outside, especially from those simple roadside breakfast stalls, isn't very hygienic. Eat less of it in the future. Since you know how to cook, cook at home. It's hygienic and safe. As the head of the Jean family, the young master had never eaten this kind of ordinary Dongguan breakfast. Hai Tong retorted, "Have you seen your own kitchen? It's cleaner than your face. There's nothing in there. Even if I were a five-star chef, without kitchenware and ingredients, I couldn't cook a feast." Jeanine was speechless. "Are you going to eat or not?" Hai Tong asked him. His stomach was also rumbling. In order not to let his wife see his weakness, Jeanine sat down at the dining table and said indifferently, "Since you've bought it, it would be a waste not to eat it. Eating it once or twice won't kill me." He was trying to save face. Hai Tong divided each breakfast item in half, giving him one portion. Then she sat down, and while eating her half, she said to him, "I saw the situation yesterday when I moved in, so I ordered a lot of kitchenware online. After everything arrives, I'll buy groceries and cook. I won't let you eat from roadside stalls anymore." He worked at a big company and had some status belonging to the white-collar class, so he was a bit particular. She was also used to cooking for herself, only ordering takeout when at the shop. Since he was particular, she was willing to accommodate him. "We're still missing a lot of things at home. Can I furnish it according to my plan?" Jeanine looked up at his wife across the table, then continued eating his breakfast. These very ordinary breakfast items actually tasted quite good. "Since we've gotten our marriage certificate, we're husband and wife. This is your home. You can decorate it however you want, as long as you don't touch my room." Other than that, she could do whatever she wanted. Okay. Having received his permission, Hai Tong decided to do as she pleased. She wanted to grow flowers on the balcony, buy a swing chair, and put it there, so she could sit and read, enjoying the flowers in her free time. "By the way, Grandma said I should go back to your house with you for dinner this weekend to meet the elders." Jeanine said indifferently, "We'll talk about the weekend later. I'll see if I have time. If not, I'll ask Grandma to bring my parents over, and you can meet and have a meal together." Hai Tong had no objections. After eating and drinking their fill, Jeanine took out his wallet, flipped through it, and finding little cash, pulled out a bank card and placed it in front of Hai Tong. Hai Tong raised an eyebrow at him. "You need money to buy things. Use this card. The pin is..." He found a pen and paper, wrote down the pin, and handed it to Hai Tong. "The money in this card is for household expenses. I'll transfer money into it after I get paid every month. I don't mind how much you spend, but I need to know where the money is going." When they first got their marriage license, Hai Tong had asked him if they needed to split expenses. He refused. Since they were married, they were husband and wife, a family. He didn't mind giving her some money to spend. Anyway, he had so much money that he couldn't even count it himself, unaware of his true net worth. He was usually busy with the company and rarely spent money, so having a wife was like having someone help him spend a little. But he couldn't be a fool either. In his mind, Hai Tong was like a scheming woman, so he had to be cautious. As long as she spent the money on their little home, he had no objections to how she spent it. Hai Tong didn't like Zhang Yin's attitude and approach. She pushed the bank card and the paper with the pin back to him, without even glancing at the pin. "Mr. Zhang, this home isn't just yours. I live here too. The house is yours, so by living here, I'm saving on rent. I'll cover the household expenses. Unless it's for something over 2,000 yuan, then I'll discuss it with you, and you can contribute a little. Her income wasn't low, and she could handle the daily household expenses. Unless it was a large purchase, she wouldn't need him to pay. It wasn't that she couldn't accept him paying. It was mainly his attitude that bothered her, as if she would covet his allowance. And asking her to keep accounts. She only kept accounts for her shop expenses. She never kept track of her personal spending. Jeanine wasn't stupid. On the contrary, he was very intelligent. Hai Tong's rejection made him realize his attitude had hurt her pride. He was silent for a moment, then pushed the card and paper back to her, his tone softening. I know you own a shop and are your own boss. How much can you earn? Since you say this home is ours, you have a share, and I have a share. How can I let you bear all the household expenses alone? Take it. If you don't like keeping accounts, then don't. About buying a car. Have you thought about it? Do you want me to make a down payment for you? With your income, making car payments shouldn't be a problem. He hadn't deliberately investigated her income, but the fact that she could run a bookstore near Guancheng Middle School meant she was capable and earned a decent amount. These days, women's and children's money was the easiest to earn. My home isn't far from my shop. I can ride my electric scooter. Guancheng's traffic is terrible during rush hour. Four wheels are slower than my two wheels. Jeanine was momentarily speechless. She had a point. He usually avoided rush hour. Occasionally, if he had urgent business during rush hour, the traffic made him question his life choices, wishing he could take a private jet. Having a car is still more convenient. On weekends, you could drive your sister and nephew on short trips. Jeanine remembered his grandmother, saying this woman lived with and cherished her sister and nephew. Let's talk about it later. We just got married and are still getting to know each other. Spending so much of your money on a car makes me uncomfortable. Actually, I have enough savings to buy a car, but I'd rather buy a house. Having a house is having a home. I'm not like you men who prefer cars. Men and women have different priorities when it comes to buying a house or a car. Women generally choose a house. Men generally choose a car. By the way, my sister wants to meet you, but I told her you're on a business trip, and I'll bring you to meet her later. Jeanine hummed in acknowledgement. After their chat, Hai Tong went to hang the laundry. Jeanine sat in the living room, wanted to read the newspaper, but there was no newspaper subscription in this small home. He could only pull out his phone to browse the news and pass the time. Did you wash your clothes? Hai Tong casually asked the man, playing with his phone on the sofa after finishing hanging her clothes. I'll take care of it myself. His clothes were always dry cleaned. Hai Tong pursed her lips and said nothing, continuing with her chores, sweeping, mopping, and tidying up. Jeanine watched her flitting around the house, doing the work of a maid. He furrowed his brow, wanting to say something, but ultimately remained silent. In his family, such tasks were done by servants, but in ordinary homes, the wife often handled all the housework. Fortunately, before they moved in, his housekeeper had arranged for a cleaning service, so the house was quite clean. She swept around but didn't find much dirt. After finishing her chores, Hai Tong returned to her room, tidied up a bit, then came out with her purse and said to the man on the sofa, Mr. Jean, I'm going to my sister's place and then straight to the shop. Text me what time you'll be back tonight, so I can leave the door unlocked. Unless I'm on a business trip, I'll be back every night. If I'm going on a business trip, I'll tell you in advance. Hai Tong acknowledged with a hum. Hai Tong, take this card. Jeanine stood up with the bank card, walked over to Hai Tong, and handed it to her again, apologizing. My tone wasn't very good just now. I apologize. I'm sorry. Hai Tong looked at him for a moment, feeling his sincerity this time, and took the card, tucking it and the paper with the pen into her pocket. I'm leaving. Okay. Jeanine stood there, watching Hai Tong leave. After the door closed, he let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. He seemed to be playing the role of husband rather poorly. Sitting back on the sofa, Jeanine picked up his phone from the coffee table and called the housekeeper at the old mansion. When the housekeeper answered, he instructed in a low voice, Uncle Yang, when Grandma wakes up, tell her to bring the gentlemen and ladies to Mingyuan Garden for dinner this weekend. Grandma will understand. Hai Tong went to her sister's house. She opened the door, went inside, and found her sister already up and busy in the kitchen. Sis, Tong, you're here. Hai Ling came out of the kitchen, happy to see her sister. Have you eaten? I'm making noodles. Should I make you a bowl? No, I've eaten. Sis, have you cooked the noodles yet? If not, don't bother. I brought breakfast for you and Yang Yang. Not yet. Yang Yang had a fever last night. I barely slept. I got up late this morning. Your brother-in-law went out to eat breakfast and even scolded me, saying I stay home all day doing nothing but taking care of the child and don't even get up early to make him breakfast. Hai Ling sounded rather aggrieved. Hai Tong was filled with anger. Why did Yang Yang get a fever? Even if the fever has subsided, sis, you should still take her to see a doctor later, just in case it comes back. Your brother-in-law is unbelievable. The child is sick, he doesn't help, and he even scolds you. Sis, I've moved out. Is your brother-in-law still insisting on splitting everything 50-50 with you? Hai Ling sat down on the sofa, opened the container of rice noodles her sister had brought, and started eating while saying, I'll take Yang Yang to see a doctor later. He's still insisting on splitting everything 50-50, saying I only know how to spend money and not earn it, that I don't know how much pressure he's under. And since we're a family, I should also contribute to the household expenses. That's definitely his sister putting him up to it. My eldest sister-in-law is married, but she still meddles in our family's affairs. My brother-in-law used to be so good to me. It's his sister who's poisoned his mind. Actually, before Hai Ling resigned, she had worked her way up to the position of finance director at her company, earning a considerable income. For love, for marriage, she had sacrificed so much, only to be met with insults from her in-laws. The money she spent was solely for their little family. The clothes she bought for herself were all paid for by her sister. She hadn't bought new clothes in a long time, let alone cosmetics. But every time she bought new clothes or cosmetics, her mother-in-law and sister-in-law would scold her for wasting money. Even if she explained that it was her sister's money, they would say that since it was given to her, it was the family's joint property, and she couldn't spend it recklessly. Sis, why don't you send Yang Yang to kindergarten and return to the workforce? You could earn no less than your brother-in-law. Hai Tong felt very sorry for her sister. When she lived there, she had done almost all the housework in her sister's home, just to spare her sister from being so tired. Now that she had moved out, her sister had even more to do. Your brother-in-law says he wants to wait until Yang Yang is 3 or 4 years old before sending her to kindergarten. Hai Ling also wanted to go to work, not to mention anything else, just the mortgage, car loan, and elderly care expenses added up to a huge burden on the family. Hai Tong frowned. She felt that her brother-in-law's attitude towards her sister was getting worse and worse, and couldn't help but ask, Sis, do you think my brother-in-law is having an affair? Hai Ling was startled and said, Probably not. I know his income very well. He doesn't have any extra money to support a mistress. But your brother-in-law's attitude towards you is getting worse and worse. Sis, you still have to plan for your future. You can't stay at home as a stay-at-home mom without income and without understanding or support. Hai Ling was silent for a moment, then said, We'll talk about it later. Tong Tong, don't worry about me. I can manage my own life. How are you? When is your brother-in-law coming back from his business trip? It'll be a while. He works for a large corporation and is very busy. Hai Ling asked her sister in detail about her new life, and, after confirming that her sister was doing well, she felt relieved. After seeing her niece, and urged by her sister, Hai Tong had to go back to her shop. She rode her electric scooter towards the bookstore, still thinking about her sister's messy life. Distracted, she didn't pay attention to the road and almost got hit by a car. Startled, she swerved sharply to the side, narrowly avoiding the car, and stopped. The car also braked and stopped suddenly. Hai Tong looked at the car. It was a Rolls-Royce, a luxury car. Several identical cars followed the Rolls-Royce, presumably carrying the owner's bodyguards. Seeing luxury cars in the metropolis of Guancheng was not unusual. Hai Tong made an apologetic gesture to the driver and quickly restarted her scooter, scooting away. She was afraid of being scolded. The driver turned to the man in black in the back seat and said, Young master. That was young madam just now. Zhang Yin's face was gloomy. He had seen it clearly. It was Hai Tong who almost crashed into their car. She was clearly distracted, riding on a busy road, and she was actually distracted. Did she want to die? Let's go. Zhang Yin cursed Hai Tong inwardly, but he didn't say anything, much less do anything. Hai Tong was nominally his wife, but the two of them were practically strangers. The driver didn't dare say another word and started the car again. Unaware that she had almost collided with her husband's luxury car, Hai Tong sped off on her electric scooter and quickly returned to the shop. Shin Xiaojuan's house was nearby, so she always arrived at the shop before Hai Tong. Tong. Xiaojun had finished her work and ordered breakfast for herself. She was eating when her friend arrived and asked with a smile, "Have you eaten?" "Yes." Xiaojun simply responded with an "oh" and continued to eat her breakfast. "I brought you 2 boxes of pastries. They're delicious. Try them." Xiaojun picked up a bag and placed it on the counter, speaking to her friend. Hai Tong placed her scooter keys on the counter, then sat down and unceremoniously pulled over the bag containing the 2 boxes of pastries. "As long as it's a dessert, I think it's delicious." "Xiaojun, on my way to work, I saw a Rolls-Royce." Shin Xiaojun responded with an "oh." It's normal to see a Rolls-Royce in some place, though not common. "Did you see the person in the car? Was it like in the novels, a handsome, unmarried CEO?" Hai Tong looked at her without speaking. Shin Xiaojun giggled. "I'm just curious why novels are full of young, handsome, and rich CEOs. Why can't we encounter any?" Novels are fiction, written to cater to the market. If it were about an ordinary worker, would anyone read it? Even if they're not CEOs, they're elites in various industries. Shin Xiaojun laughed again. "By the way, Tong, are you free tonight? My life is just a 2-point line between the shop and home." "What's up?" Her life was simple. Apart from managing the shop's business, she helped her sister take care of her child. "There's a banquet tonight, a high society banquet. I have an extra spot. Do you want to go and broaden your horizons?" Hai Tong instinctively refused. "That's not the circle I belong in. I don't want to go." Her monthly income wasn't low, but she was far from the high society circle. She didn't want to squeeze in, and she couldn't squeeze in. To put it bluntly, someone of her status attending such a high-class banquet would only be treated like a servant. "Actually, I don't want to go either. It's just that my mom asked my aunt to give me an invitation. Each invitation allows you to bring one more person. So I thought of you, Tong. Good Tong. Just accompany me to broaden my horizons. No, accompany me to deal with this, so that my mom won't nag me to death." The Shun family were someplace natives and wealthy, owning several buildings and half a street of shops for rent, with assets of at least tens of millions. Of course, they were still far from the real prestigious families. Shin's mother was most satisfied with her daughter's appearance and wanted her daughter to marry into a truly wealthy family as a young mistress. It just so happened that Shin Xiaojuan's aunt had married into a wealthy family and, after decades of perseverance, had risen to prominence in high society. Aunt Shin also loved her niece Xiaojun and felt that her niece's conditions were barely qualified to marry into a wealthy family. As soon as her sister-in-law mentioned it, she was happy to help her niece create opportunities. "Is your mom urging you to get married again?" All mothers under heaven are the same. Once their daughters are grown up, they urge them to get married every day, as if I've eaten a lot of her rice at home. "I can earn my own money. I'm financially independent, and my life is carefree. Why should I find a man? Isn't it better to live on my own?" Even if I were to marry, I would marry someone of the same social standing. I don't want to marry into a wealthy family. Although my aunt is now thriving in that circle, she also endured decades of hardship. When she first married into my uncle's family, she suffered a lot. She used to cry to my mom in private when she came back home. She knows the hardships best. Shin Xiaojun advocated freedom and didn't want to be bound by the rules of a wealthy family. Tong, please? Just tonight. Let's go and deal with it and broaden our horizons." My aunt said that there will be many eligible young men at tonight's banquet, all of some place's top business magnates, second-generation rich, third-generation rich. "We're not going to fish for a rich husband, just to experience it. I'm telling you, there's a lot of delicious food at the banquet." Hai Tong was a foodie. So was Shin Xiaojun. The two could become best friends because they were birds of a feather. After an hour of Xiaojuan's soft and hard tactics, Hai Tong helplessly agreed to her friend's request. They would close the shop early in the evening and attend the banquet together. She called her sister and learned that her nephew was not seriously ill, just a slight cold with a low-grade fever, and had already seen a doctor. Hai Tong was relieved. At the same time, she told her sister about attending the banquet with Xiaojun in the evening. It's good to broaden your horizons. Of course, it would be nice to make friends in that circle. Hai Ling was quite supportive of her sister attending the banquet. There was no need for any ulterior motives, just to purely broaden her horizons. In preparation for the evening banquet, they closed the shop after lunch. Shin Xiaojun dragged her friend home to change clothes and apply makeup. The Shin family all like Hai Tong, and no one objected to Shin Xiaojun taking Hai Tong to the banquet. Since Hai Tong was married, they didn't have to worry about her stealing Xiaojun's spotlight. In the early evening, just after 6 o'clock, the luxury car arranged by Aunt Shin stopped at the Shun family's door. Have fun! Shin's mother saw the two girls off and said to Hai Tong, Tong, please keep an eye on Xiaojun for me. Don't let her just focus on eating. She should interact more with the young, eligible bachelors. Then she said to her daughter, Xiaojun, don't let your aunt's efforts go to waste. Hai Tong smiled and said, Annie, don't worry. I'll keep an eye on Xiaojun and won't let her just focus on eating. They would eat together. With you there, Auntie is at ease. Shin's mother liked Hai Tong because she was sensible, self-reliant, and independent. If her own son wasn't several years younger than Hai Tong, she would have wanted to set them up. After learning about Hai Tong's flash marriage, Shin's mother was quite regretful. There were plenty of young men in the Shin family. If Hai Tong wanted to get married, she could choose one from the Shin family at any time. Since things had come to this, Shin's mother wouldn't mention those things again, no matter how regretful she felt. Urged by her mother, Shin Xiaojun, dressed in a white evening gown, with exquisite makeup and adorned with jewelry, quickly pulled her friend into the luxury car arranged by her aunt. Since Hai Tong was married and was only accompanying her friend, she didn't even change her clothes, insisting on wearing her everyday clothes. However, she did apply light makeup. Her simple attire couldn't hide her natural beauty. The banquet was held at the Guancheng Grand Hotel, a place Hai Tong never frequented. Guancheng Grand Hotel was one of the city's most luxurious hotels, claiming a 7-star rating. Whether it truly deserved that title, Hai Tong didn't know, nor did she care. Aunt Shin arrived at the hotel earlier than Hai Tong and her friend, greeted the lady she knew, and then sent her son and daughter inside while she waited at the entrance for her niece and Hai Tong. Seeing the car she had arranged to pick them up arrive slowly behind other vehicles, a smile spread across Aunt Shin's face. Shortly after, Shin Xiaojun led Hai Tong towards her aunt. Aunt Shin. Hai Tong echoed her friend's greeting. Aunt Shin had been slightly apprehensive about Hai Tong's presence. She had met the girl before and couldn't deny that, despite being orphaned and of modest means, Hai Tong possessed a certain elegance, her every movement exuding the aura of a well-bred lady, surpassing even her own niece in beauty. She'd worried Hai Tong might steal the spotlight. It was only after her older sister-in-law mentioned Hai Tong was married that Aunt Shun felt relieved. Now, seeing Hai Tong in everyday clothes instead of a formal gown, with light makeup and no jewelry, her natural beauty eclipsed by her elaborately dressed niece, Aunt Shun was satisfied. She felt Hai Tong was very sensible and considerate. You're here. Let's go in. Xiaojun, take out your invitation. They'll check it at the entrance and register us. Shin Xiaojun quickly produced her invitation. Once we're inside, you two should look around more and talk less. I'll introduce you to some people when appropriate. Tong, you've always been more composed than Xiaojun. Keep an eye on her and don't let her cause any trouble. The Guancheng Grand Hotel is one of the richest family's many hotels. Their sons might be at the banquet tonight. Aunt Shin lowered her voice and said to her niece, Xiaojun, if you can catch the eye of one of the richest family's sons, it would be a tremendous blessing for our Shin family. The richest family keeps a low profile and has excellent family values. There isn't much infighting for power, and most importantly, their men are reliable and rarely keep mistresses. Your cousin is still young and can't get married yet. Otherwise, this kind of opportunity would definitely be prioritized for her. No matter how close her niece was, she couldn't compare to her own daughter. However, her daughter was only 17 and underage. Talking about marriage was simply too early. Shin Xiaojun, Aunt, the richest family in Guancheng is way out of my league. I won't indulge in such daydreams. She was just here to eat and drink. Hai Tong listened quietly, not interjecting. She was merely there as a companion, also with the goal of enjoying the food. She had heard that the cuisine at the Guancheng Grand Hotel was exceptional. What's the richest family's surname? Shin Xiaojun might not be daydreaming, but that didn't prevent her from inquiring. Jean, how unusual. Shin Xiaojun nudged her friend. Wasn't the man her friend had married in a flash also surnamed Jean? Hai Tong understood her friend's implication and smiled without responding. While her Mr. Jean shared the same surname, he had no connection to the wealthy Jean family. It was merely a coincidence. There were countless people with the same surname, even people with the same name. Although the Jean family is the richest, they're not at all snobbish. As long as someone has good character and wins the affection of one of their sons, the elders won't be picky. They're very open-minded. Aunt Shin dared to entertain the idea of her niece marrying into the Jean family. Her niece was attractive, had good character, and came from a well-off family, not as rich as the Jean family, but still above countless others. Shin Xiaojun acted as if her aunt's words went in one ear and out the other, exasperating Aunt Shun to the point of wanting to pull her niece's ear. Finally, she resignedly said, "You two go in first. I see someone I know and want to say hello. And then we'll go in first." Shin Xiaojun quickly pulled Hai Tong away, relieved to escape her aunt's nagging, which was just like her mother's. No wonder her aunt and her mother were so close. They were the same type of people. It was Hai Tong's first time stepping into the Guancheng Grand Hotel, while Shin Xiaojun had been there countless times. She led her friend, expertly grabbing 2 plates of food, and retreated to a corner. "We don't know those ladies and misses. Even if we greeted them, they wouldn't bother with us. Tong, let's eat. We're just here to broaden our horizons and see what a high society banquet is like." Hai Tong chuckled. If your mother knew you came here just for the food, she'd be furious. She herself had also come for the food. Shin Xiaojun said nonchalantly, "With my background, how could I dare to yearn for the eligible bachelors here tonight? My aunt is simply daydreaming, fantasizing about me catching the eye of one of the richest family's sons. Tong, do I look like a breathtaking beauty? With my simple looks? Wanting to catch the eye of the richest family's son? Ha! It's laughable that my aunt even dares to think that. Let's ignore their thoughts and eat quickly. The Guancheng Grand Hotel has so many delicacies. I've dined here before, but I never dared to order some of the dishes. They were too expensive. Tonight, I can finally try them all. Thanks to you, I can try them too." Hai Tong was even less concerned than Shin Xiaojun. She was a married woman. The two of them hid in the corner, eating and drinking contentedly. Suddenly, everyone in the hotel turned towards the entrance, and the scene became quiet. The two, happily engrossed in their food, finally sensed something was amiss. Hai Tong nudged her friend, asking, "Xiaojun, why did everyone stop talking and look at the entrance? Who arrived?" "I don't know." Shin Xiaojun stood up, and Hai Tong followed suit. Both of them stood on tiptoe, trying to see who had entered the hotel. Unfortunately, there were too many people, a dense crowd, and they couldn't see clearly who it was that commanded such attention and created such a grand entrance. Jeanine, clad in a suit, entered his family's hotel, surrounded by a group of bodyguards. The banquet was hosted by a prominent business tycoon. The Jean family had a deep relationship with this tycoon, and as the current head of the Jean family, with the banquet held at his own hotel, Jeanine naturally had to show the tycoon some respect. Therefore, after handling important matters, he appeared at the banquet. He was tall and handsome, and even though his face was always stern and dignified, he was still a powerful magnet, attracting attention wherever he went. "Mr. Jean! Mr. Jean!" As Jeanine walked in, he could hear everyone's respectful greetings. Those with sufficiently high status went directly to greet him. Jeanine nodded politely, acknowledging everyone's greetings. He walked in surrounded by a crowd of admirers, oblivious to the presence of his new wife in the corner. Hai Tong's gaze couldn't penetrate the layers of people to land on her husband's face. She stood on tiptoe for a while, but unable to see him, she lost interest, sat back down, and tugged at her friend's arm. No need to look, there are too many people, we can't see him anyway. Let's eat. For her, eating was the most important thing tonight. Tong, wait for me here. I'm going to ask my aunt who just arrived. Such a grand entrance. It's like an emperor arriving. Shin Xiaojun was brimming with curiosity. Hai Tong gave a casual hum of agreement. Shin Xiaojun walked off alone. After finishing the food she had taken, Hai Tong stood up with her empty plate. While everyone was crowding around the important person, she could easily get more food without enduring the strange stares and scrutiny of others. After Zhang Yin entered, he first exchanged pleasantries with the host of the banquet. His bodyguards all had serious expressions, alert and attentive to their surroundings. Their young master disliked women getting too close. Their main task at every banquet was to protect their young master from those with ulterior motives. One of the bodyguards, perhaps the tallest, and therefore with the furthest view, instinctively scanned the room and seemed to spot his young mistress. Zhang Yin had concealed his true identity when he registered his marriage with Hai Tong. However, his bodyguards dared not fail to recognize their young mistress. Therefore, apart from the old madam, the people most familiar with Hai Tong were Zhang Yin's bodyguards. The bodyguard thought he was seeing things, but after focusing, he realized it really was their young mistress. The young mistress, completely unaffected by the young master's arrival, held 2 plates, independently selecting the food she liked. Soon, both plates were piled high, and she walked off with them, finally settling down at a table in the corner. She nonchalantly enjoyed her food. Bodyguard. After Zhang Yin had spoken with several familiar CEOs, the bodyguard seized an opportunity to approach him and whisper, "Young master, I saw the young mistress." Hearing this, Zhang Yin furrowed his brow, then quickly composed himself and said coldly, "Why is she here?" "I don't know. Keep an eye on her, but don't let her see me. Also, take pictures discreetly of who she came with and who she interacts with." In Zhang Yin's mind, Hai Tong was still suspected of being a scheming woman. He guessed that her appearance here was an attempt to climb the social ladder. Because he had concealed his identity, perhaps Hai Tong considered him just an ordinary worker. The bodyguard respectfully agreed. Zhang Yin nonchalantly continued chatting and laughing with the CEOs. These big bosses often close deals amidst such casual conversations. Hai Tong was unaware that she had been spotted and was being watched by her husband's bodyguard. When Shin Xiaojun returned after her inquiries, Hai Tong casually asked, "So, did you find out?" "Yes, it's young Master Zhang who arrived, the head of the Zhang group. But I didn't see him myself. There were too many people, and he was surrounded by bodyguards. My aunt told me, regretfully, that young Master Zhang doesn't like women approaching him. Every time he attends a banquet, his bodyguards surround him, blocking all the single women who want to strike up a conversation." Hai Tong gave a non-committal "Oh. Tong, your flash marriage partner's surname is also Zhang. Are you sure there's no connection? There aren't many people with the surname Zhang, and the richest family also has the surname Zhang." Shin Xiaojun took a sip of red wine. "You read too many novels. There are tons of people with the same name, let alone the same surname. Look at the wealthiest man in Hong Kong. He's surnamed Li. Does that mean everyone surnamed Li is part of his family?" Shin Xiaojun chuckled. "True. The guy I'm with is just a regular worker. He drives a Dongfeng minivan, only worth about 120,000 to 130,000. Do you think the Zhang family's young master would drive that kind of car?" "You stop with the wild guesses." Hai Tong never fantasized about marrying rich. She believed in dreaming, but not unrealistic daydreams. Speaking of which, young Master Zhang avoids young women like the plague. Is he gay? Is he married? Hai Tong wasn't interested in what young Master Zhang looked like, but she thought his avoidance of young women meant he was either aloof or had a problem. Maybe he was gay. Haven't heard any news of him getting married. Even though we're commoners, if young Master Zhang, the head of the Zhang family, were to get married, the wedding would definitely be the talk of the town. There'd be news of his wedding online and in the papers. We haven't seen any gossip about him, so I guess he's still single. Shin Xiaojun put down her wine glass. Now that you mention it, I think there might be something to that. Such an outstanding man, without even a girlfriend, it's not normal. We can't understand the minds of the rich. Let's eat. Once we're full, we'll slip away. Shen Xiaojun hummed in agreement. The two girls ate and drank without a care in the world. Many people saw them. Some just glanced and looked away, while others looked at them with disdain and mockery, wondering which rich lady brought her young maid to the banquet, acting like they hadn't eaten anything decent in 800 years, hiding in the corner all night, just eating and drinking. These two girls could really eat. Cousin June, Shen Xiaojun's cousin, Zhang Yinxing, walked over. He was 3 years younger than Shen Xiaojun, and the cousins had been close since childhood. After making the rounds with his parents, his mother suddenly remembered his cousin and asked him to find her. Yinxing, come sit. Shen Xiaojun pulled up a chair for her cousin. Tong smiled at Zhang Yinxing. His handsome face seemed to flush as he raised his glass to Tong and asked with a smile, Sister Tong, aren't you drinking? I rarely drink. Tong mainly didn't drink because she had a low tolerance and didn't dare drink casually. Someone who could sleep for an entire afternoon after one beer wouldn't dare drink carelessly. If she got drunk here, it would be embarrassing not just for her, but also for her friend and Shen Xiaojun's family. Then how about a glass of milk or juice? I'll get you one, Sister Tong. Zhang Yinxing got up to leave. Tong instinctively grabbed him and said, Yinxing, no need. I'm already full. I can't drink anything more. Zhang Yinxing sat back down. Cousin June, have you and Sister Tong been sitting here all night? Zhang Yinxing said with a headache. My mom wanted to introduce you to some decent men, but every time she turned around to look for you, she couldn't find you. My mom was with the other ladies, so she couldn't leave, so she asked me to come find you. Shen Xiaojun, having eaten and drunk her fill, smiled. Yinxing, your sister June isn't interested in those young elites. Your sister Haidong and I just came to broaden our horizons and enjoy the food here. It truly lives up to its reputation as a 7-star hotel. The food is exceptionally delicious, and Haidong and I are very satisfied. Zhang Yinxing. Now that we're full, and it's getting late, Yinxing, your sister Haidong and I will be leaving. Tell my aunt for me. Zhang Yinxing, a bit anxious, glanced at Haidong a couple more times. Sister June, you're leaving now? The banquet is only halfway through. It's still early. It won't end until at least 11 o'clock. Haidong said, Your sister and I have to open for business tomorrow. We can't stay until 11. The two women stood up, and Zhang Yinxing followed. Actually, opening a little later is fine. Zhang Yinxing walked alongside Haidong, trying his best to persuade the two sisters to stay a bit longer. That won't do. We make our money from the morning, noon, and evening crowds. If we miss the morning, we'll lose a lot of money. Shen Xiaojun patted her cousin's shoulder, teasing him with a smile. Yinxing, you enjoy yourself. See if there are any girls you like. Although you're still young, it's all right to start dating. Zhang Yinxing stole another glance at Haidong, a blush creeping onto his face. He said shyly, Sister June, I just graduated from university. I'll think about marriage after working for a few years. Haidong casually replied, Boys don't need to rush. Yinxing is only 22, right? It's fine to consider it in a couple of years. Zhang Yinxing nodded repeatedly, then heard Haidong sigh. When I met Yinxing, he was still a little kid. In the blink of an eye, he's all grown up. Zhang Yinxing. Unable to persuade them to stay, Zhang Yinxing escorted the two women out of the hotel. Sister June, you didn't drive here? Your mom arranged a car to pick us up. Shen Xiaojun said casually. Tong and I can just take a taxi. Yinxing, you go back inside and tell my aunt that we've left. Have fun. There were many people at the hotel entrance. They glanced at Shen Xiaojun and Haidong, finding their faces unfamiliar, so no one approached them. Not wanting to hail a cab right in front of the hotel, they walked to the side of the street before flagging down a taxi. They said to Zhang Yinxing, who had followed them out, Yinxing, go back to the hotel. We're leaving. Zhang Yinxing waved goodbye reluctantly, watching the taxi, carrying the two sisters drive away. He stood by the road for a long time before turning back. At the hotel entrance, he ran into Jeanine, who had just come out. Jeanine was still the center of attention, surrounded by a group of bodyguards, highlighting his kingly aura. Instinctively, Zhang Yinxing stopped and moved to the side, making way for Jeanine. Young Master Zhang. Zhang stopped in front of Zhang Yinxing and greeted him politely. Zhang Yinxing, flattered, quickly responded with a smile, "Young Master Zhang." The others were surprised to see Zhang Yin greet Zhang Yinxing. The Zhang family was wealthy, but they had little interaction with the Zhang family. In their eyes, Zhang Yinxing was still a young man. Although he had joined his family's company, he started from the bottom and was currently just a junior employee. Zhang Yin, always aloof, actually greeted Zhang Yinxing. Was he recognizing Zhang Yinxing's future status as the Zhang family heir, building a relationship in advance? Or did he think the Zhang family had a bright future? Mr. and Mrs. Zhang were among those seeing Zhang Yin off. Seeing Zhang Yin greet their son, the couple was both surprised and delighted.